Miss Ruth Paulding had retired by the time I knew her. She had taught language for so many years at Rio Grande Union High School, just across the street on Crown Hill from the house where she'd been born, that she had become an institution. So had her mother, Clara, a lifelong teacher who decided to teach one more year in Oceano when she was 71 so that she could splurge a little on herself. Her teacher's salary that last year bought her a porcelain kitchen sink and a new set of dentures. I knew Ruth, or Miss Paulding, when I was a little boy. We were both parishioners at St. Barnabas Episcopal Church. She was by then in a wheelchair, but had a kind of elegance about her that was captivating. If you got a little smile from Miss Paulding on returning to your pew from the communion rail, it carried the same freight as a priest's blessing. Ruth, or Miss Paulding, was born in that house on Crown Hill, and she would die there in the aftermath of the 1960s, when the nation seemed to be coming apart at the seams, because that was exactly what it was doing. Her mother, Clara, was a great student of history as well as a great teacher. She taught at Branch, was the principal of the Rio Grande Grammar School, and one of the founders of the high school. And Clara might have been able to give us all some perspective then, perspective we need today, about the durability of America and of Americans. Clara was durable. She and Ed buried a little boy in the front yard under a white rose bush who should have been Ruth's older brother. He died a few hours after a birth that nearly killed Clara as well. But this was a woman who had once commuted to Shalom to teach, spend the night in Creston to come down the grade in her trap and pony, where there were no turnouts and the road edged sheer drops of hundreds of feet. She later taught at Branch and by herself 60 children at 11 different grade levels, and not only did she juggle them artfully, but she loved them too. And that is the emotion that suffuses the Paulding house when you walk inside. It is a loving, unpretentious kind of homeliness, and you are honored to be its guest. It is also a little insistent, as Clara was. She was descended from Jonathan Edwards, the terrifying Puritan divine, insistent that you wipe your feet. That's why the bathtub, one of Clara's more prized possessions, adjoins an exterior door that overlooks the gardens where Ed loved to putter. Ed was by profession a physician, but by nature a putterer. Clara was by nature a pragmatist, and Ed was not allowed back into the house after his gardening until he'd cleaned himself up in the bathroom first. And the bathtub was no trivial thing. People would drive out to the Coffee Rice home in Oceano in the 1890s just to stare at their bathtub. It was the equivalent of a Disneyland ride. People just didn't have them, and the Pauldings had a Rio Grande's second. It is a long one and looks like it was made for leisurely baths accompanied by books or magazines and maybe a hot chocolate. Ed also loved wood carving. Doctoring, not so much, although a glass hutch contains virtually every instrument he'd carried in his black bag, even his original Gray's Anatomy. He resented it a little when folks got sick or fell off rooftops, as he did once, because it took him away from his flowers and his wood carving. But there was nobody in San Luis Obispo County better equipped to deal with roof plunges than Ed. He was a natural-born orthopedist, and a bone set by Doc Paulding, it was said, healed as good as new and sometimes better. Clara would need Ed when a speeding handcar smashed into her buggy at the foot of Crown Hill and broke her arm in 3 places. It healed completely. And the Pauldings got $1,500 from the Pacific Coast Railway, which they needed. Ed was as inept with money as he was skilled at setting broken bones. So the mantel and smaller pieces down to a little rocking chair for Ruth were all made by Ed, and they're cut with delicate and graceful motifs, usually floral, inspired by the models he just brought in from the garden where he loved to get dirty. Clara later bought a little farm just outside town, and it was there where Ed in his older years was happiest. When he got sick one day, in what would turn out to be his last illness, he'd forgotten to take his morning medicine. Clara, at 79, walked, or rather marched, out to the farm and watched critically as Ed swallowed his required tablespoon. There are curios under glass everywhere in the home. A rhinoceros hide warrior shield that Ed's missionary parents had acquired in Syria, where he was born. A Chumash water carrier like a canteen caulked with pismo tar. The contents of Ed's pockets, including his pocket watch and chain, money clip, a tiny folding knife. And aside from the Gray's Anatomy, there are books everywhere. A collected Dickens, 1001 Nights, a multi-volume history of the United States, collections of English romantic poets, especially Tennyson, Clara's favorite. And there is the bed frame, dark walnut, with a lion's head relief at the headboard, and that lion was Ruth's lion. It protected her every night she went to sleep as a little girl. It was as solid and as real and as constant as were her parents. And everywhere there are tea services. Ruth's little girl doll's cups and saucers are painted with delicate tiny flower buds. There's a sterling silver coffee service at one end of the dining room table. And on a shelf above there is the best of all. It's the set Ruth reserved especially for her high school students when she welcomed them into her home, the home of her own girlhood. And that service was reserved for Mexican hot chocolate so rich that teenagers would remember it for the rest of their lives.